Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time to dial in. Welcome to the first episode of Dialed In of 2026. It is your host with the most, the quote unquote football Google himself, the big guy himself, Colin O'Callahan. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you had an outstanding 2 weeks. I hope you've had an awesome break and an outstanding holidays. But football still never takes a day off. We might be, 2 days into January, but we're nearing the final week of the NFL regular season, which means the playoffs are right around the corner. Divisions still need to be locked up. Playoff spots are still up for grabs. So let's just jump right in and dial in. So let me share the screen here. Actually getting better at this. Here we go. Now we got the playoff schedule right here. We got week 18 starting tomorrow and ending tomorrow night, or on Sunday night, I should say, with the Steelers and the Ravens. But before we get into, the final showdown of the season, let's talk about what's happening tomorrow. We got two big showdowns taking place on Saturday. The first one being the Carolina Panthers versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Saturday afternoon at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 3:30 Central. If Carolina wins, the division is theirs, and nobody else can take it. If the Buccaneers win, then they need the Falcons to lose, and the NFC South would run through Raymond James Stadium once again. But if the Bucs win and the Falcons win, then Carolina still gets it via tiebreaker because the Panthers beat the Falcons twice this year, and the Bucs split with the Falcons earlier this regular season. Tampa won the first one in week 1, and then if you remember a few weeks back, Atlanta came back from a 28-14 deficit to win at Tampa Bay. So this is a huge game here for Tampa. They're the ones that are more desperate, especially since they have lost 7 of their last 8. They've lost 4 straight. But the Panthers, once again, are incredibly frustrating and agonizing as they just don't know how to, close the deal when they have the chance. Honestly, who do you even start with? You know what? Let's go with Tampa Bay because they're the ones that should have had this locked up from the beginning. So last week they lost to the Miami Dolphins, to Quinn Ewers of all quarterbacks. It's easy to scapegoat the defense and say they made Quinn Ewers look like Dan Marino or something, but to be quite honest, the Dolphins offense wasn't as sharp as I thought they'd be. Yeah, they had, a lot of big runs earlier in the first half. They had a 17-7 lead, entering the halftime break, but in the second half, they only scored 3 points. Quinn Ewers didn't do too much throwing the football. Tampa was able to slow down the run proficiently, but the biggest reason why the Bucs lost that game was because of Baker Mayfield. He was absolutely terrible. He turned the ball over 3 times, and after an opening drive touchdown, he only scored 3 more points before the final drive when they were down 20-10. 2 of them were interceptions, and another one was a lost fumble on a strip sack from Bradley Chubb. And despite the defense giving the offense countless chances to try to get back in the game, the offense was just completely one-dimensional, and it's just completely fallen off a cliff. They couldn't run the football. Their passing game was just out of sorts, and you can see the offensive line is completely battered. And more importantly, Baker Mayfield is visibly banged up. He's trying to play through a left shoulder injury. He's got knee problems. That's why he's been limited in practice all week and why he's, barely going to be 80% entering tomorrow afternoon. So the Bucs right now are just spiraling into a free fall. And we all know if they lose this game, massive changes need to be made because the offensive core is aging. The defense is just a patchwork of a unit, and Todd Bowles has completely lost his touch on the unit. Yeah, he's taken them to the playoffs in 3 straight seasons, but the biggest reason why is because the NFC South is a complete joke. And if they somehow lose to the Carolina Panthers of all teams, a franchise who just 2 years ago was on the brink of destruction, then it's just nothing more than a catastrophic failure. So I think that the Bucs right now are more desperate of a victory, but the Panthers don't get so much of a pass themselves because yeah, they might not have been the better team against the Seattle Seahawks, but I at least thought things would be competitive. After all, things were tied at 3 at halftime. The defense was able to force a couple big turnovers. They forced a strip sack, they forced an interception to start the half, but the offense was just completely shut down and neutralized. Bryce Young in the first half completed just 50% of his passes for 16 yards. He finished the afternoon throwing for 55. Yes, he had a rushing touchdown in the second half to make it a 1-score game, but one big turnover from Chuba Hubbard, and all of a sudden the Seahawks offense finally kicked into gear, and the Panthers just had no response whatsoever. So their defense ended up wearing out. They ended up, getting exhausted, and the offense just could not do much of anything. I mean, Ted McMillan was questionable entering that game due to an illness. He only caught one pass for 5 yards. Jalen Coker was the leading receiver with 18 yards on 2 catches. And yeah, like I said, their offense just is completely shut down. So entering tomorrow afternoon, I don't know what to expect. It's pretty much the exact same thing as I said, a couple weeks back when they played each other at Carolina. So my understanding is that the Bucs should be the better team here. They should win this game at home. But you know what? I'm not going to pick them. You know why? Because they don't deserve my grace. They have been one. Let me start over. Mid-October, they were considered to be the best team in the National Football League. We had people giving Baker Mayfield MVP chance because of the amount of game-winning drives he was able to pull off. And they had some respectable victories. They beat Houston at Houston. They beat San Francisco. They beat Seattle at Seattle. They did lose to Philadelphia, but at the same time, they were looking like a legitimate playoff contender. And then all of a sudden, the bye week hits, and they just start losing game after game after game. They lose to the Patriots at home, then Buffalo at Buffalo. They got blown out by the Rams. They were able to get one win against the Cardinals by 3. And then 4 straight losses happened. All of them to sub-500 teams. So you know what? The Panthers might be a frustrating team that just doesn't know how to live up to expectations. But you know what? They at least have, veteranosity. They at least have some fight. They at least have the courage to be like, you know what? We have nothing to lose. We're going to walk in there and we're going to make a statement. And you know what? I believe they can, because if they did it once 2 weeks ago, they sure as hell can now. I believe that this is going to be another close game. You know that both teams are, well matched on both sides of the ball. But considering the fact that the Bucs offense is just, starting to, lose productivity, and the defense is just a flat-out train wreck, I feel like this is the game where the Panthers offense, is able to get back into their rhythm. And more importantly, I feel like their defense is going to make 1 or 2 plays that is going to swing the entire momentum around. So I think that the Panthers are going to win this game in another close fight, 26-20. Now we move on to the bigger matchup here. Saturday night on ESPN. I'm going to assume Joe Buck and Troy Aikman are on the call. We've got the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. Not only does the winner of this game clinch the NFC West, but they get the number 1 seed in the NFC. That is right. The Los Angeles Rams are going to be the 6th seed in the NFC. Just think about that for a second. The Los Angeles Rams, who were projected by many to be the best team in football just 2 months ago, with the MVP of the league in Matthew Stafford, or what many think is going to be the MVP of the league, are going to be a wild card team and will either play the Eagles or the Bears. Yeah, right. The Eagles and the Bears in the wild card round. That is a shocking fall from grace if I've ever seen one. But we'll get to the Rams in just a second. If you look at the thumbnail of this video, I've decided to paste in a picture of Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold from when they were teammates together with the 49ers. You know why I did that? Because who would have guessed at that moment that these two quarterbacks would be going in a head-to-head duel for not just the division, but for the best team in the NFC, or to get the best record in the entire conference? Sure as hell it wasn't me. I had figured that it would be the 49ers and the Rams trying to fight each other for that spot, but not once did I think the Seahawks would be in that position. And to their credit, Sam Darnold has not fallen off a cliff, the way that we thought he would, after, the embarrassment in the playoffs last year. He has clearly resurrected his career. He has completely gone through a renaissance, and he is one of the biggest reasons why this franchise is in the position that they're in right now. But he is in the exact same spot that he was in just a couple weeks back against the Los Angeles Rams. The margin for error is this small. Now, he was able to get away with it at home. I understand he was able to overcome a 30-14 deficit and 2 interceptions to the team that everyone thought, had his number. And it was a very impressive game from him. It was by far probably the most, the best win of his career when you just consider the circumstances. But at the same time, you're on the road this time at Santa Clara. You're not at home in Lumen Field or whatever the stadium is called now. The 49ers offense has been near unstoppable this past month. Do you realize that last week was the first time that they punted the ball since November? Yeah, that's just how flat out dynamic that Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey have been this year. So if you somehow turn the ball over against this team and you put them on a short field, you might never ever get the lead again. And it's going to cause you to be the fifth seed in the league and possibly, win a playoff game, but, run into a bigger giant in the divisional round. So I feel like Sam Darnold, once again, is going to be under the most pressure to win this game because we all know what that defense can do. And we know that Jackson Smith and Jigba and Cooper Kupp and Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, we know that, they're going to do what it takes to be productive. With Sam Darnold, you're the quarterback. You're supposedly the face of the franchise. You need to make sure that this team doesn't lose because of you. And if you're the 49ers, offensively, I'm not worried about them. The defense, after last week, they're going to need to have a way better performance because there were way too many moments where, the Bears were just right there and right in the fight. Keep in mind, last week was the first time that the game was tied at 7, at 14, at 21, at 28, and at 35. The Bears even had a 3-point lead in the fourth quarter before Brock Purdy found Jauan Jennings for a go-ahead score. And it only came down to one underthrown pass just for the 49ers to be able to hold on. So I think, when you look at this game right here, yeah, you want to see how both offenses are going to do, but more importantly, you want to see which defense is going to be able to force the biggest stop at the most important moment of the game. And I honestly believe that's going to be the San Francisco 49ers here. I like Sam Darnold. I love how the Seattle Seahawks have been able to play this year, and I'm pulling for them, don't get me wrong, but on the road in a winner, I wouldn't say winner go home, but a winner take all showdown. Yeah, that's a good one. With a division title and a number one seed on the line, I think that the 49ers are better equipped to win this type of game with the continuity on their offense and the grit and the tenacity on their defense. I just think the 49ers just have a little more firepower, but I think we're going to get a really close game here. I'm going to say that the 49ers take this one, let's say 37-29. All right, so we got the two Saturday games in our lap. Now let's get to the quote-unquote meaningless games for Sunday afternoon. So let's start with the Texans and the Colts. So Houston has a playoff spot already clinched, but they could be playing for something bigger. Let me pull it up right here. So the AFC South is still up for grabs. For the Jaguars, it's simply just winning their end. And if they don't do that, then just hope that the Texans lose. But for Houston, they need to win, and they need the Jaguars to somehow lose to the Tennessee Titans, which I seriously doubt is going to happen, but we'll get to that. The Colts have announced that they're going to be starting Riley Leonard at quarterback. Phillip Rivers, that experiment is completely done. And I got to be honest, I got to give kudos to him. He did a lot better than I thought he would. For him to, jump into that raging fire with, in a potential, in the midst of a free fall at 44 years old and hadn't taken a quarterback snap in over 5 years. For him to actually put up decent numbers, I was pretty impressed. But unfortunately, none of that resulted in any wins. And now they're officially eliminated from playoff contention. And to be quite honest, just think about this for a second. Last week, they lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars, 23-17. And if you look at the positions that they were in, it's absolutely mind-boggling that we're in this situation right now. Just a month ago, the Colts were 8-2, and they had one of the best records in the National Football League. The Jacksonville Jaguars, on the other hand, had just blown a 29-10 lead to the Houston Texans to slump to 5-4. Now we jump to week 18. The Colts have lost 6 straight now, and the Jaguars have won 7 in a row. Indianapolis is not even in the playoff picture, and the Jaguars just need one more win to clinch the division. Nobody could have seen that coming. And I think with this game, the Texans are going to be playing their starters on both sides of the ball. The Colts, I feel like the only starter that they've ruled out so far is their quarterback, but I'm sure that there are going to be a few more along the way where the Colts are just like, you know what? Let's just let them heal up. We don't need to, re-aggravate it or worsen it than it already is. And let's just give the younger guys, a chance to showcase their skills and let's see what they've got. And we'll evaluate them, entering next year. And I think with that being said, I think the Texans are going to win this game convincingly. I mean, Riley Leonard, he's not terrible, but he's just not a guy that you're going to really trust to spoil Houston's division hopes. I don't care how good Jonathan Taylor is. As long as you shut him down, that's pretty much all it takes to beat the Indianapolis Colts. And we've seen that over the last, month, maybe two, even dating back to the Steelers loss when they, lost their second game of the year. So, yeah, I wish I had more to say there, but I think the Houston Texans, they're going to win this convincingly. I'll say they get it 28-13. And that's saying a lot because the Texans offense just has a tendency to let the teams hang around for way too long. Just look at the Chargers game last week. CJ Stroud went 4 of 4 for 147 yards to go up 14-0, and all of a sudden they only win the game by 4. It's just, you never know what could happen. So, speaking of the AFC South, let's talk about the Jaguars and the Titans. Titans are coming off, a pretty gut-wrenching loss to the New Orleans Saints. They had a big lead in the first half. They were up 20-10. The only touchdown that they gave up was a rip-it score from Chase Young. And the reason why I call it a rip-it score is because Chase Young not only, forced a fumble, he literally jarred the ball out of Cam Ward's hands and took it all the way to the end zone. But still, Tennessee was up by 10. Their defense kept Tyler Shough out of the end zone. Their offense was moving the football really well. And then in the second half, it was the exact opposite. I mean, their defense could not force a stop the rest of the afternoon, and the offense just went flat. And I think when you're going up against a bigger juggernaut like the Jaguars, who just only need one more win to, host a playoff game, I don't really know how much of a chance that they're going to get because their defense is singularly just solely based on the biggest focal point really is just Jeffrey Simmons. And offensively, you just, it's just going to take near perfection for them to win that football game. And I don't really see that happening. So I'm going to pick the Jaguars to win this one. I think Trevor Lawrence has been playing absolutely fantastic over the last 2 months. And to be quite honest, I think that he should, creep his way closer into the MVP conversation. I'm not saying that he should win it, but I think he should at least get a vote, maybe a second or a third place vote at the very least. I think that we're going to get, a pretty lopsided affair. The Jaguars are at home. Their offense has been humming, for a couple months now, and the defense has greatly improved. And I mean greatly. So I just think that the Jaguars are just a vastly superior team here. And let me actually pull up the page here because I just want to write my final score down. I'll say the Jaguars win this one 31-10. Okie dokie. All right, moving on. We have the Cowboys versus the Giants. So my assumption is that the Cowboys are going to play their starters. They're just going to play with pride and dignity. But that's honestly, the fact that they're even in this situation is comedic and also just agonizing at the same time because this is now the 32nd year or however long it is that the Cowboys are going to have without reaching the conference championship or the playoffs or even making it past the second round. It's just, I don't know if it's curse or if it's just, bad luck or if it's just, self-inflicted, mistakes, but unless Jerry Jones does some serious soul searching, then, this drought is just going to continue for as long as possible. So, to be quite honest, they have nobody else to blame but themselves. The Giants, on the other hand, they are coming off their first win in over a few months. And, you might think, wow, they might feel great about this, but the fans are not so happy because, yeah, you beat the Raiders and you blew them out, but it did come at a cost. Now you have the third overall pick in the draft. It's going to be the second it's the second right now, but because I, picked the Jaguars to win, it, moved out of favor for now. But the point is the Giants no longer have the first overall pick, and they're going to need a lot of things to go right for them to be able to get that spot again. But if you really think about it, I don't even know if you need the number one pick if you're the Giants because I think you need to build around Jackson Dart. I don't think that, they should try to draft Fernando Mendoza or, bring him in as competition because what the hell is that going to do? If you already traded up for a potential face of the franchise quarterback the year before, and all of a sudden you move on from him after 1 year. It just makes no sense to me. So I believe this game is really going to just tell you like how both teams are going to get, how both teams should be viewed entering the offseason. If the Giants win, then they have more promise. If they lose, then you know that they have several holes that they need to patch up. And it's going to take, doesn't really matter who your next head coach is going to be. If Joe Schoen is still around, you might as well write off the next season because you just know things are going to flare up and blow up at the worst possible time. But with that being said, I got the Cowboys winning this one. It's been way too long since Dak Prescott has lost a game to the Giants. And listen, Dallas might not have the best defense. They might be one of the worst defenses in the league. But as long as Dak Prescott is still starting and the offense still has enough firepower, then they're just going to win this game pretty convincingly. And I don't really know how much, energy or how much juice the Giants have left to try to win that game. So I'll say the Cowboys win this one 40-20. All right. Now we have the Eagles and the Commanders. So they somehow have the late afternoon window because them and the Bears are playing for the number 2 seed in the conference. But Philadelphia already announced that they're going to be resting a majority of their starters. So you might not see Jalen Hurts or Saquon or A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. Defensively, you don't know who's not going to play, who is going to play. But the thing is, you're going up against the Commanders with Josh Johnson, a quarterback that you've already pretty much bested 2 weeks ago at Washington on a Saturday afternoon. And I feel like even with backups and third stringers playing, I feel like you still have a better football team because Washington's defense is a mess. And offensively, I mean, you still have a good amount of healthy players like Krosky Merritt and Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel. But, without Jaden Daniels, I don't know, can you really count on them to beat the Eagles when they, already have a division title locked up and are just, playing for momentum heading into the playoffs? I don't really know. So to make a long story short, I'm going to pick the Eagles to win this one. They're at home. I believe we're going to get a closer game than we think because, when division rivals play each other 2 times in the next 3 weeks, you're going to get 2 things. You're going to get, the surprisingly close game that, the underdog, unfortunately comes up short in. And then the other, you're going to get the blowout that just, where the vastly superior team just shows up and plays great on all 3 facets. And there's just nothing that the other team can do to try to win. And I feel like we're going to get the former here. I think we're going to get a closer game than we think because if Philadelphia does rest their starters, then my assumption is that, the inexperience might come back to hurt them at the worst possible time. But I'll say Philadelphia wins this one 20-17. And who knows, possibly get the 2nd seed if the Bears lose. Next up, we have, let's see what we got here. The Bengals and the Browns. This is, I don't really think anybody's going to be paying attention to this one too much. Neither of them have anything to play for. They're coming off pretty good wins. Cincinnati was able to blow out the Arizona Cardinals 37-14. And the Browns might have possibly killed Pittsburgh's chances of clinching the division. But it was not necessarily because of their offense. They did get off to a great start, to their credit. They had a field goal on their opening drive, and then Harold Fannin Jr. got wide open on the 2nd possession for a 28-yard touchdown. They went up 10-0. But afterwards, their offense just went absolutely nowhere. In the second half, they were completely shut down. And the only reason why they even scored 3 points in that period is because the Steelers somehow decided to go for it on a 4th and 10 at their own 20-yard line. I mean, that Steelers offense was just flat out abysmal, but more on that later. The Cincinnati Bengals, on the other hand, they took care of business. Their offense was just flat out dynamic. They were unstoppable like we all thought they would. And of course, the Arizona Cardinals just did nothing about it until garbage time. So because both teams don't really have anything else to play for but pride and, respectability, I'm going to pick the Bengals to win this one. You know that Joe Burrow's not going to rest. I feel like the starters are still going to play. And defensively, they've been kind of better in the final few weeks of the season. But at the same time, I mean, too little, too late. The damage is already done. So I'm going to say the Bengals win in another blowout game, 30-10. So sucks to suck, Cleveland, but that's what you get. Now we get to the Packers and the Vikings, right? I think that's the next one up. Yeah, the Packers and the Vikings. So the Packers already have the 7th seed locked up. That's the spot that they're going to have in the playoffs. So Jordan Love is not going to play. Malik Willis is hurt. So Clayton Tune is going to be the starting quarterback. And the Vikings announced that Jason McCarthy is going to come back for the regular season finale. Yeah, that didn't take me too long to pick it all. And it's not necessarily because of the quarterback matchup, but it's because the Packers defense is absolutely decimated right now. If you looked at their game against the Ravens last week on Saturday night, they got absolutely run over from 60 minutes straight. Derrick Henry had well over 200 yards on 36 carries and 4 touchdowns. Tyler Huntley had 60 yards on the ground. The Packers gave up 300 rushing yards. And offensively, they did their best to keep up. Malik Willis had a great game on paper, but earlier in the first half, 4th inches at the 35-yard line, they run out of shotgun to the weak side of the field, and it goes nowhere. And on the next possession, the center snaps the ball too early. Malik Willis can't recover it, and the Ravens fall on it. And all of a sudden, you're down 20-7, and the Packers are forced to play keep up the rest of the night, and they just never – they just could not get the lead the rest of the night. And their defense just could not get a stop whatsoever. So not only does your defense have massive holes, but with Clayton Tune as your starting quarterback and, your running game going next to nowhere because of how banged up it is, when you're going up against that Vikings defense and an offense that still has a good amount of firepower left at Minnesota, I just don't know how much of a chance that they're actually going to have. So I think the Vikings are going to actually win this game pretty handedly. I'm going to say the final score is going to be 26-7. Now I'm going to jump cut to the later afternoon game between the Lions and the Bears because there are not too many circumstances entering this game. I think with the Bears, Ben Johnson announced that he's going to play the starters. They're going to try to fight for that number 2 seed. But the Lions, they're officially eliminated from playoff contention, and they have nobody else to blame but themselves for it. Keep this in mind. Let's put this in perspective. It's Christmas afternoon in Minnesota. Your playoff hopes are slim, but you need another win against the Vikings, against Max Brosmer of all quarterbacks, just to make sure that you don't fall apart at the worst possible time. And not only do they lose, their offense completely imploded, just like they did in the second half of the NFC Championship against the 49ers 2 years ago, and like they did last year in the divisional round against the Washington Commanders. They turned the ball over not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 6 times. 4 of them were from Jared Goff. 2 of them picks, and a couple more of them were from lost fumbles. And the Vikings were able to score 13 points off of those miscues. The final score was 23-10. Meaning at the very least, if you don't turn the ball over, either you go into overtime and you try to find a way to win that game, or you just get it done in regulation. Because that defense did everything they could to try to win that game up until the 4th quarter. They sacked Max Brosmer 7 times. They had the only touchdown that Minnesota scored in the first half was because they got to start from the red zone. And up until the 65-yard touchdown run from Jordan Addison in the final minutes of the game, that Vikings offense could do next to nothing. Yet the Lions offense just simply said, here you go, we don't really want to win. Botched snaps, fumbled handoffs, bad interceptions off of cover 0 blitzes. They have no one else to blame but themselves. Running game going in circles. Amon-Ra St. Brown doing next to nothing. I don't care about the injuries on the offensive line or in the secondary. When you turn the ball over, you have nobody else to blame but you, okay? The margin for error is literally this small. You can have the physical traits. It just comes down to how you can handle it mentally, and they could not do that, and they completely collapsed at the worst possible time. So you know what? I have the Bears winning this one. If they're fully healthy, they're going to get their comeuppance back from week 2 when they got 52 points hung on them at Ford Field. And more importantly, the Bears, they have a stronger team. They're more opportunistic. And quite possibly, the roles have been reversed. The Lions are the ones heading into futility and mediocrity, while the Bears are actually playing for bigger Super Bowl aspirations. Hell, they actually might get there when you look at the NFC landscape because they kept it close with the 49ers. The Rams are going to be a wild card team. They've already beaten the Packers. They've already beaten Philadelphia. The NFC South is a complete joke. So who knows? If things head in the right direction for the Bears, we might see them in Santa Clara once again. But when it comes to the final score of this game, I think that the Bears, they're going to keep it scrappy for 45 minutes, but I think that they're going to find a way to pull it out of reach in the final 15 minutes. I'll say they win 32-20. Okie dokie. Now we get to the other NFC South matchup. We have the Saints and the Falcons. Both teams are on pretty impressive winning streaks to close out the year. And whether you think it's a good or a bad thing, because, it might mean you might not have to make too many massive changes, even though you still should, then be my guest. I think the Falcons still need to fire Terry Fontenot at the end of the year. I think the Saints should have let go of Mickey Loomis years ago. But I feel like both head coaches should still remain intact heading into 2026. I've always liked Raheem Morris. I know people have, heavily criticized him a lot because of the direction that this team is headed into, but this guy's a motivator. You can tell that his players are fighting for him, and he's just a likable guy. So, unless they completely get off to the worst start possible next year, then I feel like he should still be the head coach for this franchise. And with Kellen Moore, you have your quarterback, and you have a bunch of different cornerstones like Chris Olave and Juwan Johnson that you can keep to, have him develop in the right direction possible. But that this offense needs better pieces to make sure that Shook continues to head in the right direction. Defensively, you don't really have to make too many changes because Brandon Staley has gotten this group in the right direction, which is pretty impressive considering his reputation. But with that being said, I have the Falcons winning this one. And yes, that means even if the Panthers win or if the Panthers lose, I still have them winning this division. I think the Falcons, at home, not only do they have, a more aggressive defense, they're second in the league in sacks, but offensively, Bijan Robinson has been an absolute stud, and Kirk Cousins has played pretty respectable, over these last, 3 to 4 weeks. So I think there might be a team this upcoming offseason that might want to take on a good bit of Kirk Cousins' contract and just, see what they have in him. And if not, then they could just move on from him after the next year or two because it is still an albatross of a deal. But more importantly, when it comes to the Saints, I think without Chris Olave and without your top two running backs in Alvin Kamara, Devin Neal, then I just don't really know who you could really lean on offensively besides Juwan Johnson. So I think it'll be a pretty nitty-gritty defensive game. But I think that the Falcons will be able to persevere, and I think their offensive firepower will catch on, eventually. I'll say they win 20-14. Write that down. All right. Now we get to the late afternoon window and the games that I didn't really get to talk about as much. So we got the Rams versus the Cardinals. I think the Rams are still the 6th seed no matter what. And the Cardinals, they're on a really long losing streak. The Rams have really lost their way over the last 4 weeks or so. I think they've lost, they've lost 3 out of their last 5. And now they're a wild card team when everybody, including myself, said that this team was the best in the National Football League not too long ago. Actually, probably 2 weeks ago, we were probably still saying that. And we honestly thought that Matthew Stafford was going to be the MVP. But now Drake May has the upper hand in that. And I believe Drake May should be the MVP when it's all said and done. But when we get to the Patriots game, I'll explain more why. I think the Rams should be able to win this one. I don't really know if Sean McVay is going to play his starters. My guess is he probably will. But, yeah, it's just because... What am I trying to say here? My guess is Sean McVay will play his starters, but I don't think they should just because you're going to be the 16 no matter what. So I feel like you just need to make sure that your starters are as healthy as possible and you just don't want to lose one of them at the worst possible time. But I think the Rams should be able to win this game pretty handedly. I've pretty much just lost all faith in the Cardinals at this point. either they lose in a close fashion in the fourth quarter, or they just get blown out and put up a bunch of garbage time stats and make it look more respectable than it, might look at a glance. So I'm just going to say that Rams win the game just as they did the last time in Arizona, 42-17. Okay. Now we got the NFC wrapped up. Let's get to the final games in the AFC. So we got the Chiefs versus the Raiders. Yeah, we got a third-string Chiefs team versus Kenny Pickett and or Aiden O'Connell, and a Raiders team that doesn't have Brock Bowers or Max Crosby, and a Pete Carroll who might be coaching the final game of his NFL career. So, and it's quite possibly going to be the last game Travis Kelce has in his NFL career, in his Hall of Fame career. But in my opinion, it could really go either way. And I mean, I'm not thinking about it too much because there aren't really a lot of, let's be honest, both teams don't really have anything to play for. So I'm just going to say that the Chiefs win just because, they're better coached, and you just know that the Raiders are just absolutely abysmal on both sides of the ball. Fernando Mendoza, if I'm you, I am just praying I don't get eaten alive if I'm drafted there. So I'll just say that the Chiefs win this game 10-7. And the only touchdown that they score is from their defense, whether it's a pick six or a scoop and score. I don't really know what's going to happen in this one, but it's not going to be fun whatsoever. All right, now we got the Broncos and the Chargers. So the Chargers already announced that they're going to rest all their starters. They already have a wild card spot locked up. And after last week's loss to the Texans, it's kind of deserved because their offensive line is just a flat-out mess. Justin Herbert has just been a one-man show for a good chunk of the season. And the defense did what they could, but they gave up 2 huge touchdowns to start the game. And, defensively, they just couldn't get that one final stop to, get their offense back in the game. And Cam Dicker, ironically, is public enemy number 1 because he missed a chip shot field goal and an extra point that really could have saved them and kept this game into overtime. So the Broncos, if they win this one, they get the number 1 seed. And if they lose and the Patriots win, then the AFC runs through Foxborough. But I think with Trey Lance playing and with several starters already ruled out, I think that the Broncos should be able to win this one. I feel like the Broncos are going to play all their starters, and if that's the case, then this is just going to be an absolute beatdown. My final score for this one, I'm going to say the Broncos win 31-7. And, the AFC will be able to run through the Mile High. But yeah, there you go. Now we get to the Patriots and the Dolphins. So the Patriots clinched the AFC East thanks to a win and a Buffalo Bills loss. Yeah, that was quite a week. If you're a Patriots fan, not only were you able to beat down on the Jets and completely laugh at their own misery and in their pity, but you got to see the Eagles get completely bailed out of their own incompetence. After holding a 13-0 lead at halftime, their offense could do absolutely nothing in the second half. 17 yards of offense and 0 points. 17. And slowly but surely, Josh Allen crept his way back into the ballgame with 2 late touchdown drives in the fourth quarter, but the points afterwards did not go their way. They cut the deficit to 13-6, and they go for the extra point. It gets blocked by Jalen Carter. They go for 2. Josh Allen finds Khalil Shakir wide open in the left corner of the end zone. He completely misses him by 3 yards. And the Eagles are able to hang up at just 1 point, and the Patriots clinch the division by the skin of their teeth. So Buffalo did not deserve to win that game. Their offense could not do anything for 50 to 55 minutes, and Josh Allen completely sold at the worst possible time. I thought the defense played absolutely outstanding when you look at it because they didn't let Jalen Hurts complete a single pass in the second half, and they completely bottled up Saquon Barkley as one of the worst rushing defenses in the National Football League. So I'm actually going to pick the winner of both games here. I'm going to say that the Patriots take care of business at home against Miami, against a rookie quarterback. I think it could be a trap game because, the Dolphins have not been swept by the Patriots since 2016. And you just know that Miami just is the one thorn in New England's side that just always always rattles them when you least expect it. But I think that the Patriots can win a pretty close game here. I think that they can win it 24-20. Let me turn the page here. Yeah, here we go. So I say they win 24-20. And then with the Bills, they're playing the Jets. And I think that I don't think anything else needs to be said after that. Josh Allen, I don't think that he's going to be able to play in this game because he was held out of practice on Wednesday and Thursday due to a foot injury, but he was limited today. So I think that it was just probably a way to make sure that he wasn't completely rusty, entering, this regular season finale. But I don't think the Bills should play their starters. They're already going to be a wild card team. You're really banged up on both sides of the ball. You just want to make sure that all of them are as healthy as possible. But I still think that with Mitchell Trubisky or whoever the heck you have at quarterback, I think you should be able to beat the Jets pretty handedly. Who knows? Maybe the Jets will have a 7-0 lead and we might think, oh, okay, they might have a chance. But I think the Bills will just find a way to make this a blowout eventually. So my final score, I'll say they win 27-10. And now we get to the Sunday night winner-go-home showdown between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. It's very simple here. Win and you're in. Lose and you're not in the playoffs. The Steelers are in desperate need of a victory here, especially after getting absolutely suffocated by the Cleveland Browns. The good news, you didn't let Myles Garrett break the single season sack record. The bad, it came at a very bad cost. Last week, we saw that DK Metcalf is quite possibly one of the biggest reasons why that offense even had life in the months of November and December. Because without him, their passing game was absolutely useless. Think about this for a second. They had 2 earlier 4th down attempts before the final drive. The first one, you throw a go route to Scotty Miller in the end zone in a very tight coverage, and it goes nowhere whatsoever. At your own 20-yard line on 4th and 10, you go for it, and it's completely batted down. Yet the Browns still could not do anything offensively, and you were only down by 7. Now on the final drive of the game, you realize, hey, here's a very serviceable tight end named Pat Freiermuth. Maybe I should just throw him the football. And thanks to him, you were able to get inside the 10-yard line. And all of a sudden, it's 1st and goal at the 7. And who knows? All you got to do is either hand the ball off to Jaylen Warren or quite possibly find 88 once again, because you don't have Darnell Washington. You don't have DK Metcalf. Just go to the hot hand and see what you can do. 1st down and goal, you dump it off to Adam Thielen, and it only gets 3 yards. Okay, not too bad. 2nd down, 3rd down, and 4th down. You take 3 straight shots to Marquez Valdes-Scantling with Cleveland's best corner, Denzel Ward, in coverage, and all 3 of them fell incomplete. Who else do you have to blame but the freaking offense? And Aaron Rodgers wants to yell and whine and pout at everyone else when it was partially your own fault for why you lost the game? What are you freaking doing? And yeah, now they're at home, and this is pretty much their season on the line. And now they're going up against a Ravens team that will get Lamar Jackson back. For the first time in who knows how long, he had a full week of practice. This week was the first time since November that he was able to practice on a Wednesday. And now that the Ravens offense is at full strength and the defense is able to, gel together at, the best possible time, they're the better team entering this game. But here's the catch here. Lamar Jackson's numbers in Pittsburgh are absolutely atrocious. The amount of sacks that he's taken, the amount of turnovers that he's had, the fact that the Ravens offense has, been completely shut down and looked one-dimensional at the worst possible moments, you just know that this is nothing more than a huge trap game for them. But if you can overcome these demons and find a way to win, then I think that you could be a pretty dangerous team entering the playoffs because we all know they have the talent to make a deep playoff run. You have a two-time MVP, a future Hall of Fame running back, explosive pass-catching weapons, a pretty serviceable offensive line, and defensive playmakers on all three levels. You should be able to go on a deep playoff run, but the problem is you just always get in your own way at the worst possible time. But with that being said, I think the Ravens will win this game. You know why? It's not just because I think the Ravens are the better team, but the Steelers need to look in the mirror and realize they need to completely rebuild their roster from top to bottom. An aging core, mediocrity for who knows how long. Do you realize that they have not won a playoff game since 2016? It's been nearly 10 years. 10 years! And yeah, you've been able to back your way into the playoffs over the last few years, only to get your ass kicked in the first round. Let's say they actually do win it. Do you really want them to play against the freaking Texans and get their butts kicked again by the best defense in the National Football League? What is the point of that? So I think the Ravens, with a healthy Lamar Jackson and a more fluid offense and a defense that can force Aaron Rodgers to, completely crumble apart at the worst possible time, once again, in a win-or-go-home game, either in the regular season or in the playoffs, I think the Ravens should be able to come together and make just enough plays to hang on. I think we're going to get a chippy defensive battle, but I feel like the Ravens should win 20-14. And with that, the final regular season picks are officially locked. So we got the Broncos as the 1 seed. Patriots will host the Chargers in the wild card. We got the Jaguars playing the Bills. I feel like that's going to be an amazing matchup. And then we have the Ravens hosting the Texans as the 4 and 5 seeds. I personally like that. I will take it. In the NFC, the 49ers will get the number 1 spot. And the whole NFC playoffs, it'll run through Levi Stadium. The Bears will play the Packers in the wild card. I'm sure a lot of Bears fans want to see that because I personally think the Bears can beat them again at Soldier Field because the Packers defense is just decimated and their offense, you just really don't know when they're going to show up and they're very inconsistent. The Eagles, they'll play the Rams at Philadelphia. The defending champs taking on the team that everybody thought would be the number 1 seed in the NFC just a couple months ago. So I think that'll be a great matchup. And then you got the Panthers playing the Seahawks once again. Buckle up, boys, because we're going to be in for one hell of a weekend. Boys and girls, because we're going to be in for one hell of a weekend. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. And I'll be back next week to preview the playoffs. So long. Take care. Have a great rest.